Anne Frank, top of page 53, Friday, October 9th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, today I have nothing but dismal, depressing news to report. Our many Jewish friends and acquaintances are being taken away in droves. The Gestapo is treating them very roughly and transporting them in cattle cars to Westbrook, the big camp and Dresden, to which they're sending all the Jews. Miep told us about someone who'd managed to escape from there. It must be terrible in Westbrook. The people get almost nothing to eat, much to drink. Water is available only 1 hour a day, and there's only one toilet and sink for several thousand people. Men and women sleep in the same room, and women and children often have their heads shaved. Escape is almost impossible. Many people look Jewish, and they're branded by their shorn heads. If it's that bad in Holland, what must it be like for those far away and uncivilized places where the Germans are sending them? We assume that most of them are being murdered. The English radio says they're being gassed. Perhaps that's the quickest way to die. I feel terrible. Miep's accounts of those horrors are so heartrending, and Miep is also very distraught. The other day, for instance, the Gestapo deposited an elderly, crippled Jewish woman on Miep's doorstep while they set off to find a car. The woman was terrified of the glaring searchlights and the guns firing at the English planes overhead, and Miep didn't dare let her in. Nobody would. The Germans are generous enough when it comes to punishment. Bep is also very subdued. Her boyfriend is being sent to Germany. Every time the planes fly over, she's afraid they're going to drop their entire bomb load on Britta's head. Jokes like, "Oh, don't worry, they can't all fall on him," or "one bomb is all it takes," are hardly appropriate in the situation. Britta is not the only one being forced to work in Germany. Trainloads of young men depart daily. Some of them try to sneak off the train when it stops at a small station, but only a few manage to escape unnoticed and find a place to hide. But that's not the end of my lamentations. Have you ever heard the term hostages? That's the latest punishment for subduers. It's the most horrible thing that you can imagine. Leading citizens, innocent people, are taken prisoners to await their execution. If the Gestapo can't find the subduer, they simply grab 5 hostages and line them up against the wall. You read the announcements of their death in the paper, where they're referred to as fatal accidents. Fine specimen of humanity, those Germans, and to think I'm actually one of them. No, that's not true. Hitler took away our nationality long ago, and besides, there are no greater enemies on earth than the Germans and the Jews. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, October 14th, 1942. Dear Kitty, I'm terribly busy. Yesterday I began my translating a chapter from La Belle Névracée and writing down vocabulary words. Then I worked on my awful math problems and translated 3 pages of French grammar besides. Today, French grammar and history. I simply refuse to do that wretched math every day. Daddy thinks it's awful too. I'm almost better at it than he is, though in fact neither of us is any good, so we always have to call on Margot's help. I'm also working away at my shorthand, which I enjoy. Of the 3 of us, I've made the most progress. I read The Storm Family. It's quite good, but doesn't compare to Jupe to Hurl. Anyway, the same words can be found in both books, which makes sense because they're written by the same author. Sissy van Marksveld is a terrific writer. I'm definitely going to let my own children read her books too. Moreover, I've read a lot of Corner plays. I like the way he writes. For example, Hedwig, the cousin from Bremen, the governess, the Green Domino, etc. Mother Margot and I are once again the best of buddies. It's actually a lot nicer that way. Last night, Margot and I were lying side by side in my bed. It was incredibly cramped, but that's what made it fun. She asked if she could read my diary once in a while. Parts of it, I said, and asked about hers. She gave me permission to read her diary as well. The conversation turned to the future, and I asked what she wanted to be when she was older, but she wouldn't say, and was quite mysterious about it. I gathered it had something to do with teaching, of course. I'm not absolutely sure, but I suspect it's something along those lines. I really shouldn't be so nosy. This morning I lay on Peter's bed after first having chased him off it. He was furious, but I didn't care. He might consider being a little more friendly to me from time to time. After all, I did give him an apple last night. I once asked Margot if she thought I was ugly. She said that I was cute and had nice eyes. A little vague, don't you think? Well, until next time, Anne Frank. P.S. This morning, we all took turns on the scale. Margot now weighs 132 pounds, Mother 136, Father 155, Ann 96, Peter 148, Miss Van Dam 117, Mr. Van Dam 165. In the 3 months since I've been here, I've gained 19 pounds. A lot, huh? Tuesday, October 20th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, my hand's still shaking, though it's been 2 hours since we had the scare. I should explain that there are 5 fire extinguishers in the building. The office staff stupidly forgot to warn us that the carpenter, or whatever he's called, was coming to fill the extinguishers. As a result, we didn't bother to be quiet until I heard the sound of hammering on the landing across from the bookcase. I immediately assumed it was the carpenter and went to warn Bep, who was eating lunch, that she couldn't go back downstairs. Father and I stationed ourselves at the door so we could hear when the man left. After working for about 15 minutes, he laid his hammer and some other tools on our bookcase, or so we thought, and banged on our door. We turned white with fear. Had he heard something after all, and now wanted to check out this mysterious-looking bookcase? It seemed so, since he kept knocking, pulling, pushing, and jerking on it. I was so scared I nearly fainted at the thought of this total stranger managing to discover our wonderful hiding place, just when I thought my days were numbered. We heard Miss Kleiman's voice say, "Oh, open up, it's me." We opened the door at once. What had happened? The hook fastening the bookcase had gotten stuck, which is why no one had been able to warn us about the carpenter. After the man had left, Mr. Kleiman came to get Bep, but couldn't open the bookcase. I can't tell you how relieved I was. In my imagination, the man I thought was trying to get inside to the secret annex had kept growing and growing until he'd come not only a giant, but also the cruelest fascist in the world. Whew! Fortunately, everything worked out all right, at least this time. We had lots of fun on Monday. Meep and Jan spent the night with us. Margot and I slept in Father and Mother's room for the night, so the geeses could have our beds. The menu was drawn up in their honor, and their meal was delicious. The festivities were briefly interrupted when Father's lamp caused a sort of short circuit, and we were suddenly plunged into darkness. What were we to do? We did have fuses, but the fuse box was at the rear of the dark warehouse, which made this a particular unpleasant job at night. Still the men ventured forth, and 10 minutes later we were able to put away the candles. I was up early this morning. Jan was already dressed, since he had to leave at 8:30. He was upstairs eating breakfast at 8. Meep was busy getting dressed, and I found her in her undershirt when I came in. She wears the same kind of long underwear I do when she bicycles. Margot and I threw on our clothes as well, and were upstairs earlier than usual. After a pleasant breakfast, Meep headed downstairs. It was pouring outside, and she was glad she didn't have to bicycle to work. Daddy and I made the beds, and afterward I learned 5 regular French verbs. Quite industrious, don't you think? Margot and Peter were reading in our room, with Mushy curled up beside Margot on the divan. After my irregular French verbs, I joined them and read Beyond Singing the Woods. It's quite a beautiful book, but very unusual. I'm almost finished. Next week it's Bep's turn to spend the night. Yours, Anne. Thursday, October 29th, 1942. My dearest Kitty, I'm very worried. Father's sick. He's covered with spots and has a high temperature. It looks like measles. Just think. We can't even call a doctor. Mother is making him perspire in hopes of sweating out the fever. This morning, Meep told us that the furniture has been removed from the Van Dan's apartment on Zuiders Amsterdam. We haven't told Miss Van D yet. She's been so nervous lately. And we don't feel like hearing her moan and groan again about all the beautiful china and lovely chairs she had to leave behind. We had to abandon most of our nice things, too. What's the good of grumbling about it now? Father wants me to start reading books by Hebel and other well-known German writers. I can read German fairly well by now, except that I usually mumble the words instead of reading them silently to myself. But that'll pass. Father has taken the plays of Goethe and Schindler down from the big bookcase and is planning to read to me every evening. We started off with Don Carlos. Encouraged by Father's good example, Mother pressed her prayer book into my hands. I read a few prayers in German just to be polite. They certainly sound beautiful, but they mean very little to me. Why is she making me act so religious and devout? Tomorrow we're going to light the stove for the first time. The chimney hasn't been swept in ages, so the room is bound to fill with smoke. Let's hope the thing draws. Yours, Anne. Monday, November 2nd, 1942. Dear Kitty, Bep stayed with us Friday evening. It was fun, but she didn't sleep very well because she drank some wine. For the rest, there's nothing special to report. I had an awful headache yesterday and went to bed early. Margot's being exasperating again. This morning I began sorting out an index card file from the office because it had fallen over and gotten all mixed up. Before long I was going nuts. I asked Margot and Peter to help, but they were too lazy, so I put it away. I'm not crazy enough to do it all by myself. And Frank. P.S. I forgot to mention the important news that I'm probably going to get my period soon. I can tell because I keep finding a whitish smear in my panties, and Mother predicted it would start soon. I can hardly wait. It's such a momentous event. Too bad I can't use sanitary napkins, but you can't get them anymore, and Mama's tampons can be used only by women who've had a baby. Comment added by Anne on January 22, 1944. I wouldn't be able to write that kind of thing anymore. Now that I'm rereading my diary after a year and a half, I'm surprised at my childish innocence. Deep down I know I could never be that innocent again, however much I'd like to be. I can understand the mood changes and the comments about Margot, Mother, and Father as if I'd written them only yesterday, but I can't imagine writing so openly about other matters. It embarrasses me greatly to read the pages dealing with subjects that I remembered as being nicer than they actually were. My descriptions are so indelicate, but enough of that. I can also understand my homesickness and yearning for Morgie. The whole time I've been here, I've longed unconsciously and at times consciously for trust, love, and physical affection. This longing may change in intensity, but it's always there. Thursday, November 5th, 1942. Dear Kitty, the British have finally scored a few successes in Africa, and Starligan hasn't fallen yet, so the men are happy, and we have coffee and tea this morning. For the rest, nothing special to report. This week I've been reading a lot and doing little work. That's the way things ought to be. That's surely the road to success. Mother and I are getting along better lately, but we're never close. Father, not very open about his feelings, but he's the same sweetheart he's always been. We lifted the stove a few days ago, and the entire room is still filled with smoke. I prefer central heating, and I'm probably not the only one. Margot's a stinker. There's no other word for it. A constant source of irritation. Morning, noon, and night. And Frank. Monday of November 9th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, yesterday was Peter's birthday, his 16th. I was upstairs by 8, and Peter and I looked at his presents. He received a game of Monopoly, a razor, and a cigarette lighter. Not that he smoked so much, not at all. It just looks so distinguished. The biggest surprise came from Mr. Van Daan, who reported at 1 that the English had landed in Tunis, Algiers, Cabul, and Oran. This is the beginning of the end, everyone was saying, but Churchill, the British Prime Minister, who must have heard the same thing being repeated in England, declared, "This is not the end, it is not even the beginning of the end, but it is, perhaps, the beginning of the beginning." Do you see the difference? However, there's reason for optimism. Sterlingen and Russian city that had been under attack for 3 months still hasn't fallen into German hands. In the true spirit of the annex, I should talk to you about food. I should explain that they're real gluttons up on the top floor. Bread is delivered daily by a very nice baker, a friend of Mr. Kleiman's, of course. We don't have as much as we did at home, but it's enough. We also purchase ration books on the black market. The price keeps going up. It's already risen from 27 to 33 guilders. And that for a mere sheet of printed paper. To provide ourselves with a source of nutrition that will keep aside from the hundreds of cans of food we've stored here, about 300 pounds of beans, not just for us, but for the office staff as well. We'd hung the sacks of beans on hooks in the hallway. Just inside our secret entrance, but a few seams split under the weight, so we decided to move them to the attic, and Peter was entrusted with the heavy lifting. He managed to get 5 of the 6 sacks upstairs intact, and was busy with the last one when the sack broke, and a flood, or rather a hailstorm, of brown beans went flying through the air and down the stairs. Since there were about 50 pounds of beans in that sack, it made enough noise to raise the dead. Downstairs, they were sure the house was falling down around their heads. Peter was stunned, but then burst into peals of laughter when he saw me standing at the bottom of the stairs, like an island in a sea of brown, with waves of beans lapping at my ankles. We promptly began picking them up. But beans are so small and slippery that they roll into every conceivable corner and hole. Now each time we go upstairs, we bend over and hunt around so we can present Miss Maydan with a handful of beans. I almost forgot to mention that Father has recovered from his illness. Yours, Anne. P.S. The radio has just announced that Aguilers has fallen. Morocco, Casablanca, and Oran have been in English hands for several days. We're now waiting for Tunis. Tuesday, November 10th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, great news. We're planning to take an eighth person into hiding with us. Yes, really. We've always thought there was enough room and food for one more person, but we were afraid of placing an even greater burden on Mr. Cougar and Miss Kleinman. But since reports of the dreadful things being done to the Jews are getting worse by the day, Father decided to send out to these two gentlemen, and they thought it was an excellent plan. It's just as dangerous whether there are 7 or 8, they noted rightly. Once this was settled, we sat down and mentally went through our circle of acquaintances, trying to come up with a single person who would blend in well with our extended family. This wasn't difficult. After Father had rejected all the Van Dam relatives, we chose a dentist named Albert Dunsel. He lives with a charming Christian lady who's quite a bit younger than he is. They're probably not married, but that's beside the point. He's known to be quiet and refined, and he seemed, from our superficial acquaintance with him, to be nice. Meme knows him as well, so she'll be able to make the necessary arrangements. If he comes, Mr. Dussel will have to sleep in my room instead of Margot, who will have to make do with a folding bed. We'll ask him to bring along something to fill cavities with. Yours, Anne. Thursday, November 12th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Meep came to tell us that she'd been to see Dr. Dussel. He asked her the moment she entered the room if she knew of a hiding place, and was enormously pleased when Meep said she had something in mind. She added that he'd need to go into hiding as soon as possible, preferably Saturday, but he thought this was highly improbable, since he wanted to bring his records up to date, settle his accounts, and attend to a couple of patients. Meep relayed the message to us this morning. We didn't think it was wise to wait so long. All these preparations require explanations to various people who feel ought to be kept in the dark. Meep went to ask Dr. Dussel, couldn't manage to come on Saturday after all, but he said no, and now he's scheduled to arrive on Monday. I think it's odd that he doesn't jump at our proposal. If they pick him up on the street, he won't help either his records or his patients, so why the delay? If you ask me, it's stupid of Father to humor him. Otherwise, no news. Yours, Anne.